Go ahead.
Anyway, let us start. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Cuts International and our partners, from Bangladesh Unnayan Samanay, Bhutan Media and Communication Institute, and Nepal Economic Forum, let me welcome all of you to this webinar. We have scheduled it for about an hour, but it may go slightly beyond that. So, let me start with that quote unquote warning. I mean, of course, you are free to join and leave and rejoin as we make progress. Now, this webinar we are organizing as part of our work on multimodal connectivity in the BBIN sub-region, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. Now, you may wonder that while we are talking about rather working on multimodal connectivity in the BBIN sub-region, why is it that we are doing a webinar on Kaladan Multimodal Trade and Transit Project, which is in Myanmar? Not only that, we have also prepared a briefing paper, which is written by Sridhara Datta from Vivekananda International Foundation, New Delhi, and she is present in this webinar today. The reasons are a couple of reasons, and they're very simple in one sense, but a bit strategic and complicated in another sense. First is that we should not just look at connectivity in the BBIN sub-region in silos within that region, but we have to also see that subject in a bit broader sense, both on, and particularly when we look at this, when we put Northeast India at the center of this subject of connectivity. I would use the word subject rather than debate or deliberation. So if we look at the geography of Northeast India and the location, Myanmar becomes very, very important on the southern side. And of course, Tibet is very, very important on the northern side. So we have to keep this in mind when we talk about connectivity in the BBIN sub-region and the not just connectivity, but multimodal connectivity. So we are not just talking about roadways, but we are also talking about railways, we are talking about airways, we are talking about waterways. In this case, waterways and coastal shipping particularly, they are very important. The second reason is that, and this is something which we are trying to develop a discourse on this, and plus to have our own understanding on the subject, is that while working on connectivity issues, we are fairly good, I would say, on looking at the economic aspects of connectivity. I mean, how it is going to enhance trade, how it is going to enhance investment, and things like that. At the same time, it is also important to look at the security aspects of connectivity. And as we make progress, we have to see that how we can gel these two very important aspects of connectivity, economic as well as. While Sridhara in her paper, she has primarily dealt with the economic aspects of connectivity in the context of Kaladan multimodal port. Whereas we have Major General retired Alok Dev from Indian Army, and also he was the Deputy Director General of the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, which is now named after our former Defense Minister, late Sri Manohar Parrikar. So we need to see these two aspects. And the third point, which I would like to highlight, is that when you look at Kaladan project, the importance, its economic importance as well as security importance, we need to go a little beyond that also and see that how important this project will be for our better access to Southeast Asia, Myanmar being a gateway. And in that context, we also need to see that how Kra Canal, which is still in a discussion stage. The good thing is that most likely India is going to implement the project in Thailand. How that can also be looked at in the larger Bay of Bengal context, in the larger context of accessing Eastern Indian Ocean as well as the Pacific Ocean. So this is the larger context that we are talking about. and we have to keep this context in mind. So in this work, as I said, we are looking at multimodal connectivity in the BVI and sub-region. This project is supported by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom and with knowledge support from Asian Development Bank. So under this project, other than various other activities, we are going to come out with a series of briefing papers. I mean, so far we have identified 10 topics like this. And the first one is written by Sri Radha, which is ready, which has been disseminated. And on each of these briefing papers, we are going to do a webinar like this, short duration webinars like this, so that it is they are going to help us to reaching out to the larger audience, larger stakeholders. So I'm very pleased to see all of you here who have joined us, particularly Ambassador Ong, His Excellency Ambassador Ong, who is Ambassador Myanmar to India. He has also joined. But before that, let me put it this way. This is how we are going to proceed. That I will first request Sri Radha for her thoughts, which she has articulated in her paper, and also any other larger thoughts that she may have on the subject, larger subject of multimodal connectivity, keeping Kaladan project at the center of that discourse. Then I'm going to request Major General Dev for his thoughts, particularly for blending the economic as well as the security aspects of connectivity. In that context, the importance of the Kaladan project, how it is going to help India and Myanmar to work further in future. I understand today morning only there was a meeting of the foreign secretaries of the two countries on taking forward our relationship, how it is going to help not just India but the our neighboring countries as well, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, how this type of projects are going to help them, not just India, particularly Nepal and Bhutan, which are landlocked. And this kind of projects can transform their landlockedness to land linkedness. That is something which also we have to keep in mind. So with this, let me now request Sri Radha for your thoughts in about, let's say, 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All
Over
right.
to you.
Thank you, Vipul, for this opportunity and cuts, of course. Okay, so let me straight away get to the presentation. Over the next 12 minutes, I guess I will discuss the rationale of this project, the present status, the trade possibilities and implications, not only for the regional trade, but also the geostrategic implications for Indian presence in the region. And lastly, I would refer to the local ethnic unrest that has stymied whatever progress the project had made in the last few years, and try and see what is the way forward in terms of actually completing this project and its implementation, which is certainly very critical to the amount of funds and energy we've spent on it for the last so many years. Well, to start, really, this whole idea of Kaladan multimodal transport project was conceived 15 years ago, actually, to seek an alternative route to India's landlocked northeastern states. As we know, the northeastern states, the access to northeast states from mainland India is only through the 21 kilometers Siliguri corridor, which is wedged between Sikkim and Bengal, and of course, our neighbors of Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh. The whole idea was that this shorter route would not only facilitate cargo movement, but overcome transportation delays and cost overhead that we've seen that, the very circuitous route that we had to use for so many years, but also ensure a lot of other connectivity, which is people to people and our outreach to the region. I think that was the main rationale behind conceiving this project. We also need to recall that this project was actually decided during a very difficult time that India and Bangladesh were facing bilaterally. So Indian expectations of getting transit from them at that time was not looking too good, and so it was this whole project came out, I think, of the idea that to circumvent that we needed quicker and easier access than what we have due to the geographical conditions. And this was conceived at that point of time to circumvent the problems that we were facing, and we were hoping. Of course, that situation has changed, and we'll come back to that later when we explain this further on. So, what was the is the route and mode of the Kaladan multimodal project? It connects the eastern Indian seaport of Kolkata with Sitwe Port, which is in Rakhine State, through a 539-kilometer shipping route. From there, it then links from Sitwe Port to Palitwa Jetty, which is in Chin State of Myanmar, where a 158 Kaladan River route, which is on Vesa, which this project was actually named. And from Palitwa to Mizoram State, again, it's a 110 kilometers road journey, which brings you to the Zoranpui road, which is on the border. And from there, of course, it's connected both to the national highway, which is number 54 in Mizoram, which then again further links to the east-west corridor, which was again a part of the whole connectivity corridor that was done by Prime Minister Vajpayee, which was going to give access to not only northeast states, but also access of the mainland India with the northeast states. That was how the physical connectivity was done. So what are the five? So this project has 5 components to making this finally functional. First, of course, is the construction of an integrated port and inland water transport terminal at Sitwe. To do that, you also needed to reclaim land, and a lot of dredging had to be undertaken. We also had to develop a navigational channel along the Kaladan River from Sitwe to Palitwa. Also a construction of an inland waterway, again at Palitwa, and construction of 7 inland waterway barges with a capacity of 300 tons for basically the transport on the river route. Also that highway, which needed to be done from Palitwa to Zoranpui, which I just mentioned, and then which links you to not only the other states, but also to mainland India. As we speak now, all of the components are almost ready, which includes the Sitwe port, the Palitwa jetty. The dredging of the river has been done, so it's in functional state. The construction and the unloading of the terminals have been done. The terminals have been done. The barges are ready and has been in fact also handed over to Myanmar government. It was early this year, 2020, that the port operators for Sitwe as well as Palitwa was approved, and I think they were supposed to. I mean, of course, this whole thing that happened from March has delayed the process again, but the fact that port operator through the regular process was actually selected and I think were appointed. I'm not sure whether they're actually functioning there, but it was a work in progress really. Kilometer road, which is Palitwa for Zoranpui, the final leg of the Kaladan project is actually still underway. I mean, that's the last lap, which is so there has clearly from 2008 when it was conceived and it actually started, I think 2010, it has had enormous delay. Also, that has also ensured that the budget has shot through the roof. From initial estimate was of course 535 crores in 2008. The latest estimate which we have is from 2015, where it talks about inauguration in 2024 at an estimated cost of nearly 3,000 crore. But I'm sure by the time it's actually functional, the financial implications will be far more. But the point is that if this project actually can take off from the ground, it actually holds a lot of significance for India and a lot of but first and foremost, let's look at the trade. We're also looking at building a land customs station at Zoranpui, and many other trade facilitation measures are being taken both at borders and examination of investment possibilities. Also, again, something that CUTS and others have been working at, developing regional value chains. I mean, it's a clear possibility with the transport infrastructure being developed, and finally, when it comes into play, it's highly possible that given the links that we have, its regional value chains will certainly find some space here. The idea, of course, of building a economic zone at Sitwe has also been part of the plan. But again, all of this depends really on how the project really takes off. As of now, we've seen that this project has a potential of using 20,000 tons vessels of each. I mean, I think each ship would be about 2,000 to 3,000 ton ship. Can be easily, crossing over this land, and also the road cargo would also have about 200 trucks per day, which is enormous amount given this route that which has not seen, but again, there are huge potentials. So initially, a study had been done which had actually looked at a lot of trade potential from Sitwe port. From Myanmar, that is, which includes, I mean, a lot of these products actually going to Bangladesh, going to Thailand, going to other parts, and we are assuming that if Sitwe and Kolkata port could be linked through this, which it will be, which it has, a lot of these projects, which it includes not only the oil and gas, which is of course a main product of the region, but fishery and marine products, which is right now, there's in fact a pretty robust export material going from Myanmar to other parts, including eastern region. Of course, forestry and processed timbers. Rice, we know again, is a very strong component. And again, when you're talking about value chains and developing these economic zones, we're looking at agriculture and fruits and other materials which can be easily passed over, and which again is in demand, and there's a lot of growth and all that. That about, of course, bamboo and rubber is again a very strong component in Myanmar, which has again seen a lot of export. And again, this port would also facilitate its movement not only to India but other parts which can be used using both Sitwe and Kolkata connection. But more importantly, what is it that India was looking at in terms of selling? As you would know that even today, despite the circuitous route which was earlier used, iron and steel is in great demand, given the fact that a lot of manufacturing is taking place in Myanmar. A lot of infrastructure development is still underway in Myanmar. The metal bars, construction materials, cement, fertilizers, these are all products which has been in great demand. And we are imagining that there would be far greater boost once the cargo is sorted out. And of course, that apart, Indian electrical items, kitchen utensils, these are always have been in demand there. Heavy machinery, dairy products are of course some of the items which has been, of course, and cotton fabric. That's also some of the, again, many of these products, there's a possibility of, developing regional value chain. Well, that apart from the trade, I mean, while, I don't think that trade is actually going to be transformational, honestly. It's going to take time for it to kick in and for it to, but what this project actually holds far more important in terms of implication is the geostrategic implication. And, while Kaladan is being built, India is also building the, Ritadim road, which is going to connect the Chin state of Myanmar to the Mizoram border. And this will again be connected to the other highway which we are building between India, Myanmar, and Thailand, which is going to connect Moreh to Mae Sot in Thailand through Myanmar. Which is again, this has already started, and I'm being told that several portions of it has been built, because it's actually the side, Indian side, and the Myanmar which needs it, because the Thailand side is all done, so it's just connecting through the borders. But our side, there is the project has kicked off, and I'm told it's in good progress. I mean, good. But from 2008 to 20 today, I think Kaladan has, assumed a far greater relevance. I mean, while at that point of time, the whole idea was to circumvent the circuitous route, ensure that we can access a lot of the other northeast states and, mainland India. But now I think the geography of the whole space, where India's, Act East policy, which has certainly connected us with the Southeast Asian economies very strongly, and there is we know the shipping route as well, of course, the aerial connections there. But this land route is actually very important. And this would actually connect us in a way which would, for all kinds of purposes, not only trade, but in tourism. We know Buddhist tourism is something that is very, very relevant to this region, and everybody has every Buddhist in the region wants to come to Bodh Gaya. So a lot of these other connections, and of course, as I said, medical connection again has, found space here, and these are assuming a huge relevance there. India right now, as we know, for the last several years, also focusing on doomsday. And that's again, Myanmar is a strong partner there, because to make this BIMSTEC effective, you need Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand to be working closely on a lot of these common, not only maritime issues, but even land border, commercial and trade purposes. But more importantly, and I think that's where the geostrategic relevance comes in even more strongly now, is how India is looking at Indo-Pacific and the kind of presence it wants to make in Indo-Pacific, which was really not in the radar when we thought of Kaladan initially. Southeast Asian economies, yes, but there is a far larger space that we've now created, a strategic space where, and very importantly, I think we need to remember here that both in terms of whether it's in Myanmar or in the Southeast Asian economies, India is a very wanted partner. So, I mean, there are a whole lot of dividends for India to actually start this project and, its implementation. Important to actually actualizing many of these ambitions that India has in the region. In that case, one should, I think, have to stop here and ask them, what was the lethargy all about? I mean, it's from 2010 when it actually, initiated. Uh, there has been, I would say, inordinate delay, and which can, one can also say it can be attributed to the weak local pressures, both at the Indian and Myanmar ends. We've, ad nauseum, we've seen excuses by the bureaucracy about how, so many implementation was not possible, so many things took time. All that is true because it is, the geography is actually difficult. It is a difficult terrain, but all that was also considered when the project was undertaken. So I don't see how those, post facto excuses can be kicked in. Uh, Also, and I think another reason for lethargy has been the fact that the whole India-Bangladesh development partnership landscape has changed again very drastically. So, that whole transit mode that we are looking at, overcoming the circuitous route, we've now been able to get it through the other side with our Bangladesh partnership, that we've been able to build the cross border. So all of that has really, and I think there is also, kind of the fact that you are going to cut down production centers and, get the consumers to connected closely. That somehow that appeal, while on paper, yes, we talked about Kalatan project, we talked about, kind of killing the distances, but somehow I think for powers to be, it was never sufficiently appreciated. I mean, it was there, back of their mind, but it was never something of a priority. So obviously, there has been a huge, I
Shreda,
would
two
say,
more minutes.
okay. But so right now, while, as I said, it's in the last stage of the lab where, but the critical problem here, and let me just focus on that, and I think Major General, they will look at it, is the ethnic unrest problem. See, when, when NLD came in, there was a huge expectations that a lot of these ethnic minority groups which are functioning in Myanmar would resolve through negotiations, dialogue. In all of this, we've seen how the, the conflict between military, the Myanmar military, Tatmadaw, and the Arakan army has spilled over largely into this project. And while we are in the last lap of it, the fact that the, ground conditions are very hostile, very violent. I mean, we've seen many incidents of abduction of Indian officials, as well as many other construction workers. And there's a whole, again, history to this whole Arakan army, which actually began with only 26 youths in 2009, which is now over 1,000 members. While also at a certain stage, the political, organization has been disbarred. They've also, though, despite winning elections in 2015, they were not. So basically, there's a problem about this ethnic groups, and this, in this particular case, is the Arakan army, which has a direct impact, and the way the Myanmar government works. But we also know that India has, again, the point that people made, has made tremendous, has, and in fact, even in recent, I think 2029, the Sunshine operations took place. So a lot of close security cooperation takes place between India and Myanmar, which has been very effective. And I think one of that was a core reason why we, reached out to Myanmar, despite the fact that it was run by the military leaders, which we were at that point of time very judgmental about, and we certainly supported Aung San Suu Kyi and her, quest for democracy. So how do we see it now? Because this ground problem is something that has to be resolved before Kaladan can be made functional. So, at one level, I would argue that it's, very self-defeating if we get into this whole race about resolving the problems, because this is essentially the work that Myanmar government has to do. Their military, establishment, as well as the elected government. But at the same time, given the fact that there's so much of close ethnic, overlaps between the two states, the region, there obviously is a connect between the ethnic groups on our side, and I think the Chief Minister of Mizoram has often made his, desire to see that this project takes off, because he says it's going to be very effective for the Zo communities, which are both in Mizoram and Chin state of Myanmar. And he says, the kind of momentum that would develop is unimaginable, not only in just on trade and commerce, but would have a bigger expanse in that whole region. And I would actually suggest, and I would close in here, that while I think we need to use as good officers, we know that Justice Radhanga has a huge experience of working with the insurgents and being able to resolve matters. But it really also, because to make this project not only complete and effect, I mean, implementable, but to have, the ground support is imperative. And, the fact that India is, again, as I would say, even from the insurgent groups, they've often said that the problem is not with India. But I think the point here is that both Myanmar and Indian government needs to convey to the insurgent groups that their local interests will be under considered and will be under consideration. And local government, again, the local government has to come on board with the project. And again, that's, I think, where our own chief ministers of the Northeast will have that outreach that, which Delhi possibly don't. Because I think we have to basically convey that equitable distribution for all the benefits of the Kaladan project will actually, come to these ethnic groups who are part of the Rakhine and part of the land. So I think that is imperative to making this project fully functional. I'll close here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sri Radha. Of course, I'm not going to summarize what you have said, but I would just like to highlight 2 or 3 points. One is that this project is not just a project. It's not just one initiative. It's a combination of various initiatives, and we need to look at that holistically. Secondly, once it is fully operational, there is going to be a lot of benefits to the local population in Myanmar as well as in Northeast India, particularly in states like Mizoram, also Manipur. So that is something which you need to take into account, that through local economic development, we have to keep trying to achieve incremental progress on having better security on the ground. So that is something which you need to keep in mind. And thirdly is the fact that since it's going to have such a positive benefit at the local level, while Government of India and Government of Myanmar, they should keep exchanging their views, their thoughts on the implementation of this work. And once the whole project is ready, how it can be leveraged for further benefits for the local people. I think at least for India, we need to also keep engaging our state governments, particularly those in Northeast India, Mizoram and Manipur in particular, in those dialogues as well. So I know that para-diplomacy is an emerging subject in countries like India, but it is in this context of projects like this, I think para-diplomacy, which effectively means the involvement of subnational entities in the diplomatic efforts, is going to become more and more important. So with that, let me now request Major General Deb. Can somebody unmute? Yeah. So Major General Deb, over to you for your thoughts in about 10-12 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chatterjee, Chairman, and good afternoon, Dr. Datta and all other participants. Thank you for giving me the honor of being on this platform with such a distinguished panel. Just a few things I'd like to say. Firstly, the chair in the beginning and Dr. Datta in her presentation right now, they've covered most of the things I wanted to say. Nevertheless, I'll just have a try. Firstly, my compliments to Dr. Datta for a very exhaustive paper. It's an excellent backgrounder, totally up to date, and it brings out all aspects of the project very clearly. So for a beginner, I think if this is one paper which is doing a sterling job in putting people wise on such an important project. As far as India is concerned, the importance of transnational multimodal links to neighboring countries, the importance cannot be overemphasized. In our neighborhood, we've undertaken, I think, 3 of these transnational multimodal links. The first, as you know, is in Chabahar. I mean, from Mumbai to Kandla to Chabahar in Iran by sea, then on to Zahedan and Zaranj on the border with Afghanistan by rail, and then from Zaranj to Delaram by road, 213 kilometers, something which our border roads has already constructed. The Chabahar to Zaranj portion and the Zaranj to that portion by rail is still incomplete. The ERCON is supposed to do the superstructure and one Iranian company is supposed to do the substructural work. It's stuck up for various reasons. I think it has something to do with American sanctions as well on a company associated with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. So there are geopolitical reasons and some local pressures also, but I'm sure that will see the light of day because work on that, on resolving that is on. The second multimodal thing, of course, is with Bangladesh, where we've had a lot of success recently. As you know, now we have a number of road and rail link connectivities with Bangladesh. You can go by road, you can go by rail, you can go by a combination of inland road, inland rail, and various things. I think once the bridge on the Feni River, which is separating Bangladesh and Tripura, once that bridge is complete, then we can move from Chittagong or Mongla straight up to this place, the Ramgarh on the Bangladesh side, cross over the Feni to Sabroom, and then straight on to Agartala. So there's been a lot of success there, whether it is from Haldia by inland water to Daudkhandi, Brahmanbaria, and thereafter onwards. We've had a fair amount of success in that. The third, of course, is the project at hand, the Kaladan Multimodal Port Project. Yes, it's now, I'm told, valued at 2,904 crore rupees. And I'm also given to understand that it is India's single largest developmental activity in a foreign land. Single largest development activity in a foreign land, which is quite something. It's piloted by a Ministry of External Affairs, and the framework agreement is very, very explicit. It's been signed by Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, our late president, when he was the External Affairs Minister. And the government of Myanmar is responsible for providing the land and for the safety and security of our personnel, while the government of India is bearing the cost. That is more or less what the outline is. The initial cost, of course, was much lesser. It's grown up manifold, but the implications of security, economics of such multinational, multimodal trade corridors cannot be underestimated, as both Dr. Datta and the chair have said. In one case, with Chabahar, it goes to the international north-south trade corridor and beyond to Europe. In the case of Bangladesh, that is the backbone of our connectivity with our own northeast. And in the case of Kaladan, this is an extension of our Act East policy. It is vital for going further into Southeast Asia. So I don't really know which is more important. All three are equally important. As far as the specifics of the project are concerned, it's come a long way. And there is work on the Indian side also in Mizoram, where the road improvement goes on, because the terrain on the Chin Hills and the Mizo Hills are adjoining each other, and the terrain is equally difficult on both sides. So while work on the Mizo part is more or less complete now, we wait the completion of the road to Zorinpui. So geopolitically, this project is as important as the others, but in terms of execution, there may be a little more complexity. Labor is scarce, the cultivating season, the harvesting season, the same as the working season. While the Rakhine part is, the coastline is flat and then it gets hillier. And adjoining Chin state is far more hilly and forested with thick bush all around, and it continues that way to Mizoram. Dr. Datta quoted a study which talked about 200 vehicles per day on this road. I happen to have glanced through another study also, and this is done by Engineering Projects India, Government of India Enterprise, and they did it for a stretch of kilometer 60.7 to kilometer 70.7. And they also came to a figure of around 200 based on the capacity of Paletwa to handle cargo. And adding a few military vehicles and civil vehicles and escorts, they came to a grand total of 232. Of course, this study was about 2 or 3 years ago. The tender came out in, I think, 2018. And one has to understand that all this is predicated on the cargo handling capacity at Paletwa, the infrastructure which is developed there at Paletwa to handle the cargo, the barges themselves which are coming, and the capacity of the Kaladan River itself. We have to remember that the Kaladan is not just a small river. The Kaladan is a big river. There used to be pleasure cruises on this in luxury steamships once upon a time. The advertisements are still there on the internet, and I'm sure that I'm not too sure whether they're still on, but I'm sure that they will start again whenever it happens. There was talk about how Bangladesh has opened up now, and therefore there are many more options. True. In 2019, we got access to Chittagong and Mongla ports. Before that, we did not have access to these ports. So straight away the question comes to mind that, well, why not put all eggs in the Chittagong Mongla basket? So that would not be very prudent. While Chittagong's cargo handling capacity as per its website is quite substantial, even so, the fact is that Kaladan by itself, once it is developed and once the special economic zone at Sitwe is developed, and once the capacity of the ships which are coming to dock at Sitwe increases, then this project takes on a life of its own. More than that, it's a gateway to the Northeast from Myanmar. It's a test of our commitments, it's a test of our capacity, because this is a project which has been hanging in the balance for quite some time. So we're going to see this through. And it is not just for Myanmar, it is also for others to see that India can do such a difficult project, because as I said, complexity-wise, this is probably the most difficult. Kaladan will continue to have relevance as an alternate route, also because of its location, because of its connectivity with the Trans-Asian Highway, which will come sometime. This project has an importance of its own. However, ongoing security concerns, transnational multimodal project in a sensitive region spanning borders would obviously have security challenges, which are quite apparent to a layman. So firstly, some pertain to border management, which is a subject all by itself. And here we have something called the free movement regime, wherein people can move 16 kilometers on either side to their ancestral lands and for cultivation and so on and so forth. So therefore, you have the concurrent issues which will crop up and which have been dealt with in great detail by internal security experts: drugs, smuggling, trafficking, arms and ammunition, insurgents, wildlife, what have you. So when you're dealing with a project like this, one has to factor in dealing with every relevant government agency on the Myanmar side and the corresponding people also on the Indian side: immigrations, customs, narcotics, local law and order, and of course the militaries and the paramilitaries who are actually manning the borders. Also, we need to appreciate that each leg of this multimodal port project, whether it is the ports, whether it is the transshipment facilities, whether it is the workshop, the warehouses rather, the security of the river banks, the people who are actually manning these projects, the barges, the road convoys, these are all vulnerable. Therefore, security of each of these is a task by itself. Till the time the entire project is completed, all this is being managed by India. The Myanmar government will then be taking this on in addition to the security it's providing. A bit of crystal grazing about Myanmar's, not just Myanmar's, the Northeast region security situation. Because you know that Myanmar borders 4 Indian states. You start from the top, Arunachal, then you come to Nagaland, and you come to Manipur, and you come to Mizoram. Total of 1,643 kilometers, 4 states, 135 ethnicities in Myanmar. Many of these ethnicities are armed. Lack of information actually precludes one from hazarding a guess, but they are wild estimates. Now, after concluding a protracted negotiation with 17 armed groups, the government of Myanmar did have an agreement in October 2015 with 8 of them. The rest, including those who did not negotiate, are located all over Myanmar, but essentially on the borders with China, Laos, and Thailand in the Kachin, Shan, Kya, and Kain states. Not, of course, to forget the Indian insurgent groups, which are also based in that area and which are also causing a fair amount of trouble for the Indian security agencies. Rakhine State, or Arakan as it was earlier known, is the second most populous state in Myanmar. It has a coastline, it has a hilly hinterland, and it is adjoining Chin State, which is hillier and has the Mizo Hills as the adjunct. Rakhine is also the center, the start point of Myanmar's COVID pandemic. The Arakan army, which was just talked about by Dr. Datta, it draws material sustenance from its communities in Kachin State, but operates in the Rakhine and Chin states. It directly impacts the Kaladan project. As per a report which has been authored by the International Crisis Group, this is an independent think tank which deals with security issues, and it's based in Belgium. The report of June this year, I'm going to read this out to you. I quote: "The armed conflict being waged between government forces and the ethnic Rakhine Arakan army in Western Myanmar is currently the most serious by far of the country's multiple decades-old internal wars, with some of the most sustained and intense fighting seen in many years. After the conflict escalated significantly in early 2019, the government ordered a tough military response and on 23rd March designated the Arakan army as a terrorist organization." So we are dealing with a terrorist organization here. The trajectory of the conflict is alarming, complicating problems in a state already traumatized by the separate crisis resulting in the violent expulsion of 700,000 minority Rohingyas. Over the last 18 months, clashes have increased in regularity and intensity. The geographical scope has expanded and the civilian toll has grown. Despite the significant loss of life on both sides, nothing suggests that Myanmar's military is wearing down the Arakan army or degrading its ability to operate. But nor is there reason to believe that the Arakan army can achieve its aim of greater political autonomy on the battlefield. So this is where we are. So we know that there is a situation there. And certain incident which this report doesn't capture, the Myanmar army carried out a parachute drop on the 10th of March this year. They suffered casualties. Some people were captured and killed. As expected, there was collateral damage. As per one report of the Chin state officials, around 8,000 people have been internally displaced and about 60,000 people have been materially affected. As a matter of fact, in June this year, the United Nations World Food Programme pushed through a single tranche of 165 tons of emergency food and nutrition into the area of Paletwa town. So though the Arakan army has control over large portions of Rakhine and claims Paletwa, though Paletwa is, I think, 15% Rakhine and 85% Chin, the saving grace is that policy-wise, it has not voiced any opposition to the project or to development in the region. Yes, there have been issues in between, as has been brought out by the previous speaker. But what might transfer after the November 2020 election will have to be seen. Also, we have to factor in another point. There's a gentleman called Anders Kaur who has published a study called China's Diplomatic Terrorism in Myanmar, where he claims that 95% of the Arakan army's funding comes from China, in addition to the uniform, weapons, ammunition, and such like. The other major player in the region, of course, is the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, Rohingya Muslims whose origins are in controversy in Myanmar. Today, they comprise around 4% of the Burmese population. It is learned that they were even enlisted by the British to fight the Japanese during the Second World War. Rumored to be supported by the ISI, with weapons supplied by Pakistan and China, the ARSA has no shortage of recruits from its ethnic population. So far, there are no specific reports of the ARSA acting against this project. So how this crisis of the Rohingyas is resolved at the national, regional, and international levels, as also the behavior of the locals with the Rohingyas would actually influence the actions of the ARSA in days to come. So while today's paper is subtitled Navigation Myanmar's Ethnic Conundrum, the geographical location of Myanmar makes it equally imperative to navigate the ensuing geopolitics as well. The issue of Chinese support to the Arakan army is a case in point. As widely reported in the media, in February, a Chinese consignment of 500 rifles, 30 machine guns, and 70,000 rounds of ammunition purportedly dropped at the Monakhali beach in Bangladesh, taken by Rakhine porters from the Chittagong Hill Tract into the India, Myanmar, Bangladesh tri-junction, taken into Mizoram and dropped southward through the Purva corridor into the area of Paletwa. Mixture of mules and on foot. Whom does such an incident benefit? It benefits the insurgents, obviously. It benefits the Chinese who continue to have leverage. And to whose detriment is it? Obviously, to the detriment of the local population, to the detriment of the law and order agencies, the government of Myanmar, and to the government of India, which is going through with this project in cooperation with the government of Myanmar. And the fulcrum of all this activity is Paletwa. Paletwa is the center from where you get access to the Chittagong Hill Tracts, you get access to Mizoram, you control the mouth, not the mouth, but you control the major portion of the Kaladan River, the navigation part. Paletwa becomes very important, which is why also the operation in February, which I mentioned, of the Myanmarese army was in the area of Paletwa. However, despite the challenges of COVID-19, the internal displaced people, and the insurgency in Rakhine, India continues to push forward with this project as part of its Act East. As I said, this project has acquired a life of its own It's an alternate line of growth. It has potential which is yet to be realized. So once we see it through, only then will the benefits start flowing in, as what has been discussed a little earlier about the trade part. India's got a lot of connectivity projects in Myanmar. There are 7 or 8 of them which I've listed down. And we have a lot of complementary humanitarian actions also. Like when our president visited there in 2018 December, he handed over a few huts for displaced people. So with the government of Myanmar providing the security for this project, the government of India providing the funding and pushing people through, there's no reason for this project not to get through in time and to rest of the population to reap the benefits what we can think of. So I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Major General Deb, for bringing these various security aspects to a project, to a multi-country, cross-border, multimodal project like this, which is one of its kind. I'll very briefly touch upon one particular point, is that till about few years ago, there was a school of thought, maybe there is still is, in India at least, that if you develop infrastructure, particularly road infrastructure in border areas, then your security is vulnerable. Now that has completely changed, and now a new school of thought has emerged that in order to have better security in our border areas, we have to develop border infrastructure in a better manner. So thank you once again for particularly highlighting the point about the importance of Paletwa and how challenging as well as how opportunities can be there if we can overcome these challenges in an incremental manner. Now we are going to open the floor for discussion. We still have few minutes, and we can, of course, we can extend the session by a few more minutes. We have a number of very distinguished participants which I can see, and I would request, we have already received a few questions which will come there later, but I would first request Ambassador Ong, if you want to share your thoughts on the subject which we are discussing. Ambassador Ong, Prashant, can you unmute Myanmar Embassy? I think we are having some issues, technical issues maybe, but let's see how it goes. But before that, if I may ask Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakraborty, our former ambassador to Bangladesh, about his thoughts on the subject which we are dealing today in this webinar, particularly and also in general about this project. And one question which has come is that the geopolitical or geostrategic importance of this project may have changed as a result of our increased connectivity initiatives with Bangladesh. So how can we look at it more as a trilateral project involving India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar while going forward on this subject? Host, can you, Ambassador Chakraborty?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much, and it's great to listen to all of you, and good to see you all again. Well, one thing, let me say that that there is no alternative to connectivity if you want development and prosperity of your own people. And of course, politics tends to trump economics in many ways. Connectivity is sometimes seen as, like in Bangladesh, for example, it was seen as, when it was called transit, I remember that it was seen as something negative and not to the benefit of Bangladesh. But I think that era we have left behind. Certainly for Act East policy, connectivity to Thailand is important. And as you yourself said that in Thailand, there is a very high, but the connectivity is fairly highly developed, and I've seen it from that side. And so I think this trilateral highway, for instance, should be given very, very high priority. But as we see now is that the Kaladan project and the connectivity project that we now have with Bangladesh are helping all the countries. So I think this whole concept that earlier that connectivity might lead to other issues which are more troubling for whatever security and things like that. But you can't have this and you can't have that in the sense that there are no black and white choices here. For example, at one time, as you mentioned, that connectivity was seen as a negative in the border areas, but no longer. I think connectivity has to be seen in the positive light, and it is going to help. And even though for example, you build a road, and even the insurgents will use it. Of course, they will use it, but then it depends on your own security and law and order to prevent them from doing so. But I think the shadow of insurgency, etc., will continue on these projects, but that should not deter us. I think, and I think we should continue aggressively on connectivity because that's the only way to bring the region together and to provide other countries like Bhutan and Nepal their avenues and outlets to the Bay of Bengal and the ports, etc. So I think, in an overall sense, I think all these connectivity projects are vital, and geopolitics will impinge on it. I think, I'm sure, given the current contestations that are taking place in the region. But together with all this, I think the BIMSTEC has to also step into this connectivity business because both maritime and land connectivity will be important. So I think I'll stop.
Thank you, Ambassador Chakravarti, for your thoughts, where you have underlined the importance of connectivity, including for security in our border regions, and the importance of multimodal connectivity, since you have pointed out both maritime as well as land connectivity, and why we need to look at them not separately, but in a congruous manner. We have Dr. Didar Singh, who is the former Secretary Government of India and very closely associated with our work. I'll come to Dr. Singh a little later. But before that, I can see that Mr. Purushottam Ojha, who is from Nepal, former Commerce Secretary of Nepal, who has joined us. I mean, as Ambassador Chakravarti has just said, that we need to also look at in the larger context, this project, we need to look at the larger context of connectivity in the BBIN as well as BIMSTEC. So, Mr. Ojha, very briefly, if you can tell us that how Nepal is looking at these type of connectivity initiatives between India and its neighboring countries. Over to you, Mr. Ojha.
Thank you, Bipul, for this opportunity to participate in this very important. Are you hearing me?
Yes,
Sometimes
yes.
there is problem with my computer.
Actually, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. And of course, I missed some part of the presentation by Sri Radha Datta because I was a little bit late to join it. Anyway, what I think that multimodal connectivity is quite important, and particularly in respect of the Kaladan multimodal project, it is particularly important for the northeastern India to connect with the mainland India. What I say. So I think this is a quite important project. In the meantime, what I think that equally important for India to connect with all its member countries, with neighboring countries, with multimodal transport connectivity. Alok Dev was talking about the multimodal connectivity to Iran through Chabahar port, as well as of course, the Bangladesh, through Bangladesh to northeastern states of India. These are quite important. What I see that even there are connectivity things going on between Nepal and India, particularly in 2018 during the visit of Nepalese Prime Minister to India. There was understanding was reached to use the inland waterway transport for transit traffic. moving to and from Nepal. So I think important development, and of course India is taking lead on this, and I think this is a very good initiative, and we have to go on enhancing multimodal connectivity within the region and beyond, within the BVIN region. That is very much important. Of course, Port is doing very good work on that, on carrying out study and multimodal connectivity and BVIN countries, and of course now we are talking about connecting it to beyond the region, beyond the sub-region to Myanmar and beyond. So I think these are quite good initiatives, and it will benefit the whole sub-region in a positive way. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
stop here.
Thank you, Mr. Oja. I mean, like in case of Nepal, we have participants from Bhutan. So I would request Shivraj Chetri, Mr. Chetri, if you can briefly share your thoughts on how Bhutan is looking at these initiatives. The same question, I mean, more from the perspective of Bhutan, because of the fact that this particular project is about enhancing connectivity between India and Northeast India, sorry, Myanmar and Northeast India in particular, but it doesn't stop there. We have to, if we look at the larger picture, it's also about India's neighboring countries. So, Shivrajji, if you can share your thoughts briefly. Shivrajji, are you there? Prashant?
Sir, he is there but not responding, I think.
I think there's a technical issue. Let me come to Mr. Manohar Hussain from Bangladesh. Mr. Hussain, I mean, you are an expert on waterway transport. So this particular project is not just about, as I said in the past, in the very beginning, that is a combination of land connectivity, water connectivity, and here we are talking about maritime as well as inland water. So how do you think that Bangladesh is looking at this type of projects?
Okay,
what are the possible benefits that Bangladesh can get as a result of this project, including what are your thoughts on over time, not now of course, on making it more from bilateral to trilateral, and then let's see, I mean, how we can expand the circle. Over to you, Mr. Hussain, briefly.
So you know that Bangladesh and India, are two neighboring countries, and they have, connectivity and other transport connectivity and other projects since the, independence of Bangladesh in 1972. And especially, I want to focus on the inland waterway. And as Ambassador Pinakaranjan rightly described, that there were some, problems in the mindset and regarding the connectivity project, but that era has gone. We are smelling and we are enjoying a little bit more enlightened situation currently, and there are many projects undertaken jointly by India and Bangladesh. Development of navigability of two states which have been declared as the route primarily maintained for Indian transit traffic. That is one stage in the river Brahmaputra, that is from Sirajganj in Bangladesh up to the border, just downstream of Dhubri in Assam, and the other stage is in Meghna River, that is Meghna and Borak Valley, that is from Ashuganj in our country up to the Jokhiganj area. So that progress is now underway. Development of navigability, and the length of this waterway will be around 500 kilometers. So that will, with the implementation of this project, the transit traffic and intercountry trade traffic by river to the connectivity between India, mainland India and Northeast and connectivity between Bangladesh and Northeast will be more beneficial. And another thing is for containerization of the traffic, Indian government has already agreed to develop a inland container terminal on Ashuganj, and that project is underway. And with the implementation of this project, a new railway between Ashuganj and Akhaura, just opposite of Agartala, that is also underway, and that will more develop the connectivity to Bangladesh. And in the meantime, there are some problems of the for furthering the provision of the protocol has been taken place, and the inclusion of new route, especially the Rajshahi-Dhulian route, has been extended to the main network of the protocol up to the confluence of Padma and Brahmaputra up to with Dhulian, and I think that will establish a connectivity of North India to Northeast India and North India and Bangladesh. So I think so far Bangladesh and India is concerned, the relationship of and furthering the connectivity and developing the connectivity is now continuing, with full satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. I think, let me put it this way: we should no longer look at bilateral initiatives on their own or bilateral initiative per se. We also need to see, and the time has come for that, how we can join dots from various bilateral initiatives to look at the larger picture of connectivity. And it is through connectivity we can address, not just we can do more trade, there can be more investment, and we can also address many of our security concerns. So I'll come to there are a number of questions. I think we should extend this session by 15 odd minutes. Sorry about that. I'll come to some of those questions which are, I think, very, very important. I'll pose them to both of you. But before that, let me request Dr. Didar Singh for your thoughts on this subject. Dr. Singh?
The only thing that we need to do is, only thing we probably need to look at is the fact that, as Bipulji is himself pointing out, we must update this paper to add two things to it. Number one, what is the relevance of this particular project to BBIN? That's one aspect. Second aspect is, geostrategically, how does it put India in a better position vis-a-vis Northeast, Bangladesh and Myanmar? Now I know that's a difficult choice, but even if there's one paragraph on it, that's enough. It just at least puts you in the context of looking at the whole project in a different context. You see, we can't look at every project in the context it was built in 2008. We must look at it in its context today. What does it have its rationale today and for the near future, next year, year after that? What is the context? And I think General Dev was mentioning the same thing. And how does it geostrategically bring India to a position that enhances us vis-a-vis Myanmar, vis-a-vis Bangladesh, vis-a-vis that entire BBIN project that Bipulji is separately working on? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. We'll talk to Dr. Datta on this matter separately. I think this is the beauty of having e-publications. So let's see how best we can do that. So I would pose a couple of questions. One to Major General Dev. There is one question from Mr. Uday Bhanu Singh, who says that Kaladan project will be important in the Indo-Pacific context. On the one hand, we have Kafku, which is being developed by China, and there are talks that Kra Canal could come up. On the other, we have plans to develop Andaman Nicobar Command. So given that, what are your thoughts, Major General Dev, in the overall about the importance of this project in the overall Indo-Pacific context and the recent developments which are taking place not very far from our coast, but not very far from India, in South China Sea in particular. So it would be good to hear your thoughts on this point.
Just a few points on this. Firstly, as far as the Isthmus of Kra is concerned and the Kra Canal, there's a lot of to and fro between the Kra Canal, but we have to finally see when the first foundation stone is laid and when the work actually begins. The importance of the Kra Canal for us, what happens is that in case people don't go to the Straits of Malacca but use the Kra Canal, they come straight into the Andaman Sea. And this being appreciated, it is why development of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands is going on at a very fast pace. That is going to continue. Kra Canal or no Kra Canal, as far as the Andaman and Nicobar is concerned, that is going to be our bulwark against anything inimical coming to us from the east to the west, either through the Kra Canal or otherwise through the Straits of Malacca. Whichever way it comes, we have the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Point one. As regards the Chinese ports in coming up in that place, yes, what do the Chinese call it? The Chinese call it the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. They are working on that. They will continue to work on it. It is their prerogative. I have a feeling that the Myanmar government is quite even-handed when it comes to understanding what the dangers of dealing too much with the Chinese are. There are enough models to look at and derive suitable lessons from. So while there could be in the Bay of Bengal, there could be an Indian port in Myanmar, there could be a Chinese port in Myanmar, they could very well coexist. At the same time, we have the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, the Bay of Bengal is there, our shipping is there, our navy is there. I think we should be able to manage it. And overall, it is integrated into the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you. Let me now come to this question from Arnab. This is for Srirada. I mean, very shortly, what is the status on the short sea shipping agreement between India and Myanmar? This will be very important to enhance the potential for this route. Also, there is doubt whether the Sittwe port can receive 20,000 DWT vessels. Srirada, any thoughts on this point?
Yes, we just signed that agreement, but 2018, if I recall, MOU was done on that, but there has been no progress except for the fact that, you know, the development in terms of infrastructure was taken place. But I think on paper that has been done. What was the second thing that you asked me?
This is about the capacity of Sittwe port. I mean, whether
so this is this is again, we're referring to a study here really, because in terms of what it can, it full capacity it be able to, but the whole problem has been there of reclaiming that land where we needed to expand that, and also dredging has been a huge problem. But again, from whatever MEA papers and whatever other reports that we've been able to see, they say that dredging is being done satisfactorily as per taking in the amount of movement that is possible. In fact, the December 2019, we were in Myanmar and post our meetings in Napadea and Yangon, we were supposed to actually go there. But unfortunately, the security issues were so difficult that two of us who were actually scheduled to go there, we were not able to. I came back to Delhi while my colleagues stayed back in Yangon. But we wanted to see it for ourselves, because all of this is actually reports, and again, there has not been too much of updating on the ME about this in terms of exactly day to day what has been the improvement. But from whatever we've seen so far, dredging has been satisfactory. But again, we've seen that on inland waterways, vis-a-vis Bangladesh, vis-a-vis here, the dredging is a key, component, which again they say once the momentum starts, then that will be able to, because the minute you don't use it, that whole siltation starts up again. But if there is a movement of cargo and vessels on that area, that track, then dredging won't be a issue constantly. So once you do it, once you start the cargo movement, but again, I don't know when the cargo movement in terms of what is potentially expected will actually be. And in terms of the larger point,
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to make the larger points that General Dave made, and I think there is absolutely full agreement with everything he says, and the issues on the ground and everything. And about in terms of the paper that Dr. Dida Singh mentioned, I think there has been, Vipul, you gave me a word limit, so we have to live within that word limit. And I think that I did talk about the geostrategy. Even when I spoke today, I did talk about the larger from 2008 to 2020, the Indo-Pacific has taken on a different nature completely. And the importance of the region to India is very different from what we actually envisaged then, which was looking at, just overcoming the circuitous route and all of that. But whole of this BIMSTEC and everything has taken a far greater, role and relevance for India in the region. And I think it's only going to grow. But the point here is, of course, I didn't link it up with BBIN, but you again know that I've been working on this Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, triangle for the last, I think, 7-8 years, where we were able to. But because of Rohingya crisis, an obvious political issue, we've been not able to. But this whole, that's been, even when I was in Mackay's, I was able to get the sides together. Even in DIF, I've been able to do that. So that's always been a cornerstone in my understanding the region, that we need these three countries to work together on the not only the connectivity, but in terms of trade, commerce, and all other, so once that kicks in, the political landscape also changes. That's been, but again,
This is precisely the point, Srirada. I mean, what you have just said. We have this Rohingya issue, which is a serious security issue in this and that part of the region. Don't you think that the time has come for us to seriously think about this project, at least in terms of our thinking? May not be execution, but in terms of our thinking, to make it a trilateral project. There are strong connectivity, physical connectivity related reasons for that. Because this Lunglei Aizawl Road in Mizoram, which is the key north-south corridor to Bangladesh, which has been improved using World Bank financing.
Yes.
Then there are other border points, Indo-Myanmar border, which need to be opened up in conjunction for transit route for Myanmar through India.
Yes.
And the fact that in our foreign ministry, our territorial divisions are very, very important. Of course, all divisions are important. But in this case, our territorial division, it covers the relevant territorial division. It covers Bangladesh as well as Myanmar. So that, what you call a coordinated approach is not much of a difficulty. So don't you think that we should seriously start thinking about making it a trilateral project?
I have some reservation about this. I mean, as I said, I've been trying to do this right from 2014 when I first held the India Triangle dialogue. I held that in India, in Kolkata. I took that to Dhaka, which was attended by the Foreign Minister and Foreign Secretary from Bangladesh and High Representation of Myanmar. I was going to replicate that in Yangon, but we had at that point of time elections there, so you're not able to. But so that has been on. We brought them to here in VI about exactly a year ago, and it was very, very, the fact that politically, there is an argument about what is happening there. But again, my conversation with my Bangladeshi counterparts as well as friends from Myanmar, everybody wants to do it. But the reservation here is actually when we were doing this dialogue, when I reached out to MEA, they were not very happy in supporting it. I mean, it was, of course, a VIF dialogue that we had done. It wasn't, tracked to anything of the sort, but you put it under I don't know why, what was the issue. I actually met many of these officers who are working, on this particular territory, as you said. But there seemed to be reservations about how they were apprehensive about how the two governments won't be able to align. While India was happy to support, but I found that. But anyway, we still went ahead with the conversation. And it was
Things might have changed now.
I hope so.
Things are changing quite fast. Now, before
from Bangladesh and Myanmar, they were happy to look at ways that they could actually converge on. Despite at that point of time, the Rohingya issue was really very highly critical. So despite that, the fact that they came, the fact that they were able to discuss matters frankly says a lot. And I certainly support the fact that I think it will be greater for the region if all of us work together. That convergence is important to make us great, bring greater
Thank you.
benefit.
Thank you. Before we conclude, thank you. And before we conclude, I'll request Major General Dev for his concluding thoughts. But before that, we have Pushpa Chetri from Bhutan, and she's about how Bhutan is thinking about these initiatives and what kind of benefits that Bhutan is likely to get or perceived to receive from connectivity initiatives like this. So over to you, Pushpa, very briefly.
Thank you very much, so Vipul. It is very interesting to hear from all the experts. I would like to highlight something that we could learn from this project. For our multimodal connectivity project is that we are looking at gender mainstreaming. We are looking health concerns. We are looking at the environmental and climate change issues. I would like to maybe request somebody to highlight how these issues have been tackled in this project.
So thank you, Pushpa. That's very interesting and very important. In our briefing paper, since it is a briefing paper, we have not gone into the details. I'm sure that scholars like Shirada and many other scholars, they must have worked on it and were working on it. These are all very important issues. The gender impact or impact on women's economic empowerment on a project like this, impact on environment, impact on other marginalized communities. So definitely we're going to keep that in mind as we make progress in our work. So with that, let me now request Major General Dev for your concluding thoughts. Then I'll finally come to Shirada for her concluding thoughts. We have a couple of more minutes. 1 minute each.
Thank you, Vipul. The question which you threw about India, Myanmar, and Bangladesh working together.
Yeah.
It's geography-wise, it's an imperative. Strategically, it's an imperative. Is it the opportune moment today? Question mark. Geographically, yes. Strategically, yes. Economically, yes. Politically and situation on ground, no. I think I must be blunt about it, because I think right now, and I would love someone to contradict me with facts and figures, I think today the relationship between these two countries is at its nadir. And this will continue till such time that they come to some sort of an accommodation over this issue of 700,000 refugees. India is treading a very fine line. We have two important neighbors. Both are equally important to us. Both of them are very important to us for connectivity reasons and for our security reasons. We cannot afford to look at one and disregard the other. And we have to be sensitive to their individual respective concerns. So while I repeat, geographically, yes, economically, yes, strategically, yes, timing wise, maybe we have to let them resolve this issue. We hope it can be resolved, or at least brought down from the tempo at which it is right now.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Shirada, your final thoughts?
I think for the region, the point that Ambassador Chakravarti made and everybody, it's true. I mean, there is no going back on the fact that the region requires a multimodal transport system, and that's been kicked in. And now how quickly can we make that functional effective? A lot of the stuff with Bangladesh is in place already. With Myanmar, it's been very slow. And I think, let's not go back as to what was the delay and whatever. Right now, even, as I said, it's only the last lap. But again, this whole political, this ethnic quagmire is something that we are aware of. It's not new to Myanmar. So I'm just saying that why is it that we have not been able to engage with them more closely? I mean, as I did mention very briefly in the paper also that, our chief ministers in the Northeast have far greater interaction with the ethnic groups. There's a huge overlay of ethnic, and India is a very, very welcome development partner there. Whether it's with the military, whether it's the, elected government, as well as the ethnic groups, then you have a goodwill of that level. Why is it that we've not been able to, make our presence more strongly and influence the stakeholders? I mean, I think that is critical here, and I think the political leaders, the Northeast leaders need to play a far greater role. Leaving it to just bureaucracy in terms of implementing the infrastructure and all of that is one part of the project, but the fact that we have this conundrum in Myanmar is not an unknown factor. So we have to learn to deal with it, and I think, as I said, the geostrategic landscape is getting far more critical now. An Indian presence there, if you're linking up with Nicobar, you're linking with wherever, it's important that India makes its presence and uses every stakeholder possible to kind of reach out and ensure how we can make this a functional project at the earliest.
Thank you, Shraddha. The long and short of this project, just in terms of numbers, the number of kilometers of roads built, or the number of ports built, trade enhancement, investment opportunities. Of course, all of them are important, but at the same time, and more importantly perhaps, is the stories which are there. Stories about the people on the ground, those who are likely to be benefited as a result of these projects, and those who are likely to be challenged as a result of these projects. So we need to get these stories from the ground, and that is something which our initiative intend to do. We are trying to do that. We always try to see what kind of incremental progress that we can make. So with that, let me come to an end, close this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. I think it is a very fascinating discussion. We have learned so many new things. Of course, we are going to keep in touch with all of you. And as I said in the beginning, this is just the beginning of a series of webinars that we are going to do as part of our work on multimodal connectivity in this sub-region. So we have identified 10 topics for writing the briefing papers, and on each of them we are going to have meetings like this. Maybe our future webinars we could extend the time till 1.5 hours, so that we have a little more time for discussion. And on the possible revision of this paper, I'll talk to Dr. Datta. Shraddha, I'll talk to you and see the best which we can do. But as I said, it's a work in progress. So when the project was conceived in 2008, the geopolitics, the geostrategy, geoeconomics, all have changed hugely. And this has become, if not a hotspot, but definitely a theater. And this theater is becoming more and more important for all of us. So we have to keep that in mind. So with that, let me thank Major General Deb. Let me thank Dr. Datta for joining us today in this webinar. And we're going to keep in touch with you, not just two of you, but with all of you as we make progress in our work. Thank you very much. Good night, good evening, and bye.
Bye-bye.